And here I am. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new development stream of ScourgeBringer. Sorry for last week for not being there for the stream, but we had very little progress last week, mostly because Florian, if you read our newsletter or follow me on Twitter, you know that my teammate Florian had a little baby 2 weeks ago, and he's currently on parental leave, so the project did not progress much because I've mostly done behind the scenes stuff like managing business, also working for other studios on other kind of stuff like helping on porting their games and so on. But yeah, I still managed to work on the project, and hopefully next week it's going to be back on a regular pace because Florian is coming back at the office next week. And yeah, so what I've been up to these past 2 weeks on ScourgeBringer, I've mostly enhanced a few stuff. Nothing really new, but I've done a lot of polish on currently on existing stuff. I've just launched the game. It's building and should be there in a moment. Okay, here we go. Yeah, as always, if you have any question or comment or anything you'd like to ask or just say, feel free to go into the chat or just to react on Twitter if you like, or on Discord. I'm trying to get everything here. And of course, if you are watching this video on a YouTube replay, feel free to comment in the comment section. I'll try to reply and catch up with this. Okay, so what did I change lately? I've mostly changed or tweaked a bunch of stuff related to the physics and the controls. And the major stuff that I've been working on has been to enhance the AI. It's not quite visible because our enemies are still quite simple and we don't have many kind of enemies yet into the prototype. But I've worked on the AI framework to make them more, intelligent, but it's more like, I'm going to try to show you. I'm going to clean this up and kill most of the enemies so I can show you what I want to. Go up there. Okay. Okay, here we go. So previously, what happened is that the enemy were kind of dumb, and they are still a bit dumb right now, but and what they were trying to do is that when they felt like they were in range, even if there was a wall between the enemy and the character, they were trying to like hit you through walls or trying to fire at walls, like there was nothing into the line of sight, blocking the line of sight. Yeah, it feels pretty basic, but I've implemented some sort of line of sight. So right now the enemies are trying to get around obstacle before they are trying to reach me, and they are waiting for having me in plain sight before trying to shoot at me. It seems something like to be very obvious and that every game has, and yeah, of course, every game has some kind of stuff. But like I said, it's a work I've done to prepare some kind of framework to enable more advanced stuff with the AI. And so now I can do something like enemies that see through walls, some that don't, and also use this line of sight stuff to do more clever thing about the controls of the character and some attacks. And for instance, the dash attack has been something like enhanced with this framework, because what was a bit not quite smooth about the dash is that in the game you play either with a D-pad or with a joystick and to move around and also to aim the direction of the dash. The thing is, when you use a stick to aim on 360 degree, it means that, well, basically you can dash in any direction, and that's cool and all. And the problem is that a joystick isn't quite precise when it comes to do precision shot, because when you hold a gamepad in hand, you don't really have your thumb really aligned with the axis of what is really the axis of the joystick. And what happens is that you are losing some precision if you want to do some very precise things. Usually it's not a problem, because when you are using games with a joystick, you often have some, how to say, it's usually some games with a lot of movements and representation in 3D. And when you do things, you usually have the joystick pushed into a direction, so you can have a feel of how the joystick behave and where you are actually going. In a 2D platformer, it's another kind of problem, because you don't really have a representation of a space or a representation of what the joystick space is, unless you put something like a crosshair around the game character and so on. But that's not how you want movement to work. So the main issue here is that when you were dashing around, and let's say that I want to dash on this enemy and I'm dashing at it with a specific angle, so I'm trying to, from my position here, I'm going to try to dash toward this enemy, and as you see, it's kind of difficult to push the stick, jump, and push another button to dash, and to get a perfect angle. It's not quite perfect. And the problem is that when you are in the action and that you want to combo enemy in a very precise way, you will most likely to miss enemy, and that's a problem. So what I did is, using the algorithm of detecting the line of sight of enemies and which enemy are seeing the players, and inverse what enemies the players can see. Based on this, and based on the range of the dash, I'm doing something like now some sort of predictive aiming for the dash. So let's say there is this enemy here, and I'm going to try to dash on it with an angle that is not quite perfect, and boom, it's still hitting the enemy right front. And why? Well, that's mainly because now there is something like a predictive aim assist with the dash. I mean, now you can't possibly miss a dash because of the precision of the stick. It's not like an automatic aim. It's not meant to cheating and so on. It's really something that is used in a predictive way, in the sense of that there is some sort of algorithm and like a naming AI that is trying to predict what are you going to do, what is the enemy you are willing to hit, and if you are something like a bit off from the aiming, then the predictive algorithm tries to catch up and to correct this aiming and make you go straight into the predictable enemy. And that works kind of well. Like, I am against the wall and I'm trying to dash towards the wall, nothing happen. But if I am starting to move towards the enemy, the predictive algorithm is like understanding that you are moving towards this enemy. There is no other enemy around. And it makes this enemy the perfect candidate for something to dash toward. And if I just press on the dash button, the predictive aim right now, since I'm not pushing the stick, it's thinking that I want to dash straight forward, but the enemy is a bit above the ground, so that means that the dash is not quite on the trajectory of a straight line. And when I'm going to dash on it right now, and as you can see, I've only used the dash button, and it just means that it was the perfect candidate for a dash, and that there was no way around that the algorithm could predict that you were dashing away the enemy, and so it dashed on the enemy. And this is used pretty much everywhere. I'm using also this algorithm to detect what kind of doors should be fired at when you are using the automatic aim with the gun. And when you are in the action, it works pretty well. There are most probably going to be tweaks to do, and mostly stuff that are not going to work as is. But right now, it feels quite okay. Yeah. So yeah, catching up with the chat. Hey, Lokrim. Hey, Gamawunta. Hey, Demotion. Hey, Claude. Yeah, aiming assistance, tricky topic. Yeah, it's a very tricky topic because a lot of people think that it's cheating, and I believe you know this subject very well because yeah. So if you don't know Claude on the chat in the chat, he's one of the men behind the platformer game Splasher, and Splasher is a very well done game in terms of controls because it's a platforming game that plays with only one joystick, and that's very cool because it's very important for platforming game to not rely too much on two joystick because it's too much of a cognitive work and it's too difficult to play a platforming game with two joysticks, like having also buttons to jump and so on. It's very difficult. And in Splasher, it's kind of the same problem because you have to shoot on enemies, you have to shoot on specific target and so on, and yet it works very, very well. And yeah, I believe that you've been tricking this stuff a lot because yeah, I can only imagine how far did you get because the game just plays perfectly for what it's trying to do. And when we started to design ScourgeBringer, Splasher was actually one of our studies regarding how platforming game involving aiming works when they are only using one joystick, which is something that we wanted to do. We don't want the second joystick to be something like mandatory for gameplay. You can still use the second joystick to like having a manual aim for precision shot and so on, but we are not going to do anything that require precision shot in the game. So what you are most likely going to use is the automatic aim. So right now the automatic aim shoots on the closest visible enemy in a specific range. But what we are going to do, it's going to also to use this predictive algorithm that is used on the dash, and hopefully it's going to work quite well into like predicting which kind of which enemy you are trying to shoot at. Trying to predict which enemy you are most likely to hit next is kind of tricky, but with some very slight tricks and some very simple prediction stuff, you can like cover like 90% of all the cases and so on. Of course, there are edge cases, but you can do it right. And I believe that what we have here in ScourgeBringer is quite cool, because when it starts to get where you'd like it to be, it's like the perfect system about like aim assist and so on. It's when people don't even notice that there is an aim assist. If they don't notice it, you just win. You win the fact that there is no cognitive bias between like having an aim assist and having the feeling that people are not in control of what they are doing. But control is something that we want. It's a very important thing for our game. We really want you to be in full control anytime. So yeah, I spent a lot of time like tricking controls, tricking how the physics works and so on. And yeah, over the past 2 weeks, what I've just shown you seems pretty simple when you look at it and when you play it. But there is a lot of tricky stuff behind, and I'm pretty satisfied that things are getting along well. So yeah. Yeah, question in the chat. No, not a question. Demotion says, I remember this afternoon when we talked about how puzzling the mashup would be. Let it work as well. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And yeah, the next step for ScourgeBringer is to get boss in, and also to have more kind of enemies. I think we are going to add more enemies before we are going to add bosses into the game, because bosses still need quite some work. And right now I am trying to show you the boss editor, but it's crashing. Why is it crashing? It's trying to load stuff. It's trying to load my okay, yeah, I know why it's crashing. It's crashing because I have moved a bunch of files. Where is my entry point? Entry point, where are you? Here it is. Folder, read string, and here start. Yeah, it's crashing because no, it's not a good project. Yeah, today I have refactored how a lot of files are organized. So I've moved around a bunch of files, and the editor keeps it keeps somewhere a preference file, keeping track of of where are some of the settings files or some data files. And the problem is that I haven't changed these files on my personal computer. I've did on my workstation at work, but not here at home. And that's why it's trying to crash. If I jump going to here in the save folder, it tries to read a specific file into this folder, but it's not in this folder. I just have to remove this, and it should be in this folder. And now if I just press play, it should start. Yeah. So this is our game editor. I've already shown to you quite some time. This is our boss editor, and this is a single animation. In this animation, I have a bunch of other stuff here. I'm going to remove this because I want to show you something. I'm also going to remove this. So this is our boss editor, and our boss editor is working with something like timeline. Hi, Dev. How are you? Yeah, it works with the timeline. So if you know software like Flash or maybe also Spine, which is also used to animate 2D stuff and so on, or any kind of software with a timeline that allows to animate you something, it's pretty simple. It's something where you define where are your keyframes, and when you are on a keyframe, you just define what how things should move. So here, this animation, if I let it play, it's the idle animation of this boss. And you see that on the animation, it's moving one hand, but it's not moving the second one. So I'm just going to add the animation on the second one. So what I'm going to do, it's here on the right arm, it's missing a keyframe here. And so what it's missing a translation of 5 pixels to the right to be at the same of the left arm. If I play, I have the animation on the two hands. I'm going to add also a little translation on the head. And I want the head to, no, that's the torso. I don't want to move the torso. Remove keyframe. And I'm going to add keyframe here, here, and I'm going to move the head a little bit down. And yeah, it's about right. Yeah, I'm good. Just working my own games. Yeah, on what games are you working, Dev? Cream a little more, and the animation of the right end of the boss says hello. Yeah. I can make an animation that say hello because you can also work on rotations. So if I add here a rotation and I just like rotate the hand and play, so I'm going to have a rotation and I can make stuff with this. And here on this editor, so you have one timeline to manage anything that is animation. And you can define stuff like rotation, translations, and also changing sprites, because you can also make sprite animation within something like bone-based animation. And I have another timeline that is the weapon of the boss, so anything that is shooting bullets and so on. Here it works kind of the same, but you define on the timeline triggers, like adding triggers for something like I'm going to use the right hand and doing a single shot. So now I have a single shot set up here, and when it hits this single shot, it shoots a burst of fire. So there is 3 bullets going on here. That's because that's how the weapon it's using is configured. But it's using one burst. And if I want to do something else, like start shooting on a specific frame and stop shooting later, and on a specific range of time, I just have to use start shooting stuff, and let's say here stop shooting. So what it's going to do is between the 10th and the 20th frame, it's going to keep shooting. And another thing that's cool is that it blends with all the animations that I've set up in the animation timeline, which means that if there is a hand that is moving around or rotating, the bullets emitters are going to be following the same rules. So they're getting rotated and they're firing stuff. So Dev is working on, it's gonna be a story-ish boss fighter. Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to check this out after the stream. I look at this. And Krim saying it's possibly a good tone for the player. Yeah. Okay, a boss fighter with enemies in between. I'm definitely going to check this. And I'm going to remove this and this. And the third timeline that I've added this week, actually, it's a particle timeline. It's just to make some animation more fancy and to add some special effects like smoke effects or dust or like swoosh animation and impacts or anything that is not into the proper animation of the boss. So what I've added is a particle emitter stuff. So right now, if I'm going to start and try to play this, I believe, yeah, I'm not sure if you can see right now in the video, but there is like little particles that are firing off the hand of the boss. It's not quite visible. It's quite a test here, but I think you get the idea. It works the same as the weapon stuff. You define a range between the particles are active and so on, and it also follows the parts they're attached to. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to move this particle somewhere else. I'm just going to remove the rotation here. I'm going to save this and quit. Okay, where is my boss catalog? So this is my boss catalog. It's a file, it's a JSON file in which you define what is the boss, what are the sprites that are composing the boss, how they are all relatively placed, and it's like the zero frame of what is a boss that is defined into this file, and what texture it's using, what weapon it's using, how weapons are attached to which part of its body, and it's the same thing with the particles. So here I have a particle collection, and they are bound to the left arm. No, the left arm or left arm, yeah. And what I want to do is to remove this and to attach the particles to the body, to the torso. So I'm going to add them here. So now my particle emitter is attached to the torso, and what I want is that the particle are like what I'm going to do, or maybe I'm going to put it on his head. Yeah, I'm going to put this on his head. And I want that it have something like 3 flames above his head. And I'm going to try this by adding one emitter here. That is going to be like 15 pixels above its head. And hopefully if I start the game it's not going to crash, but I believe it's going to crash. It didn't. Okay. It didn't crash. Okay, so that's a good thing. And if I try this, okay, that's it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I wanted to add 3 of them, but it's already quite cool. So what I'm going to do is to like fire this every 2 single frame, peut-être, maybe? Peut-être. I'm speaking French now. Peut-être. Yeah, it's kind of tedious to like going through all the animation. And I don't even know it ends on the 20th frame. So if I do something like this, so it's going to fire the particles every 2 frames. And yeah, here you go. It kind of works. Yeah, so that's basically what I've been up to these past 2 days, maybe. So the next step here is to add some more parameters, like allowing to apply specific rotations or specific movements to particles, and maybe add I was about to say maybe add randomness to particles, but I've already done random particles, so our particle system already have randomness in. Trying to keep up with the chat. Project Gateway to start working on some bosses. Yeah, me too. It's really exciting stuff. Bosses are really challenging to design, but I think it's the most rewarding stuff that you can do when you have a boss in a game and starting to move around and so on. I think I believe it's pretty satisfying. Making levels, building up to him. Yeah, I should also have to work on levels. So right now, levels are, there is like here a white wall. So this is one single room, but it's a test room. You can see blue particles and yeah, hi UFO. How are you? Yeah, what I need to do still for bosses here is to use this. This is a room editor. These are all the rooms that are used to generate levels. But bosses are going to have their own unique rooms because they need to be designed specifically for bosses and so on. And what I want is that the room that you are going to design for a boss into this editor, you should be able to, like here, with a drop-down box and so on, to be able to like select which is the room that is used for this specific boss. And well, yeah. So that's one of the things that I'm going to work on in the next few days, I believe. One other important thing about here the boss and the animation is that I'm going to add a fourth timeline. So I have one for the animation, one for the weapons of the same animation, one for the particles. And the first ones that I need to add are for sound trigger, because yeah, most obviously you want your boss to have sounds. Some sounds are going to play specifically for some animation and so on. So what you want to have is like be able to add sound triggers within this timeline and to synchronize everything up. So, but this is going to be for later time. For now, there is no sound in the game because we haven't started working with the sound designer yet, and we are waiting for knowing how we are going to work with the sound designer, because when it comes to sound, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there are also sound engine. There is engines for sound, as there are engines for graphics and for game as a whole. And since we are like crafting mostly everything ourselves, I'm going to use a pre-made sound engine, a well-known one, because sound designers usually work with sound engine like Fmod or Rise, to name a few. These are the two most popular and most used ones. And yeah, I can't like right now start implementing sound without knowing which is the engine that the sound designer would like to use, because I prefer to work with an engine that the sound designer is going to be comfortable with, and not to like impose our own technology or ways of working and so on. So I need to wait for a sound designer to join the team, and once we are there, we are going to define which sound engine we are going to use, and I'm going to integrate it into our game, and I'm going to then add this fourth timeline. And yeah, So in our previous game, we haven't been using a proper sound engine. We were using the primitive sound support that is built into monogame, and it's cool. But if you want to do something polished and that you have very fine control over sound and so on, it's not working. It's not made for doing things other than like playing a sound and let's call it a day. But with the sound engine, you can do some way more advanced stuff. Like if you were to program something like, let's say, a gunshot, when you use a gun in a game and like fire several bullets, you will notice that the gun never has quite the same sound. Because if it would have sounded weird, because that's not how sound works in real life. If you are doing a sound like tapping on the table, each tap is a slightly different one, very slightly different one. And if it was like always the same, it would not like feel quite right. And it's the same for video games. If you implement sounds in a way that they are all the same and very repetitive, it doesn't sound like polished or too repetitive and so on. So, and sound engine allows to like the randomness into sounds, or having like many sounds blended into one, or many other things that allow you to custom sounds very, very finely, like blending stuff and also make ambient sounds, and it's very cool because the sound designer can do his own stuff into the sound engine, and the programmers, the developers, only have to like adding triggers, specific triggers into the game, like a triggers to say like, okay, here there's a door that is going to open, and the sound designer just have the list of the triggers, and he sees, oh yeah, door opens, I'm going to add everything I need. I'm going to add something like 3 different sounds for the doors to not sound all the same, and like pitching them, adding some randomness, adding some clunky sounds and so on. And it's very cool. So, and we want you to work this way on ScourgeBringer. We want to do some very high quality stuff regarding the sound design. So yeah, but more on that later, because we are not quite there yet, and but we're getting prepared. What can I say more about what I've been up to? Not much. I think I've went through everything I've did over the week. Yeah, we didn't do much. Yeah, mostly because, like I said at the beginning of the stream, my teammate Florian is on parental leave because he got a little boy about 2 weeks ago, and he's going to be back at the office next week. And we are going to work again on the game and so on. And I'm also going to be working full-time on the game, because over the past few days I've been helping another studio to finish up their game, and so I haven't been able to work much on ScourgeBringer, but this is going to change hopefully. And more news on that later. So if there is something you'd like to see, ask and so on, feel free. I'm going to keep up with like explaining you what we are going to do for a few minutes still. And yeah, if there is something you'd like to see or ask, do it now before I move on to other kind of stuff. Is there any question in the chat? Okay, the emotion saying sometimes even the slightest variation in pitch does wonders. Yeah. It's sometimes some very simple tricks like this that makes things very like lively. And yeah, so I'm going to try to bring up my trail board so we can see together what's coming next. So regarding the physics, what I still have to do, I have some of the tasks are in French, so that's because I'm trying to put them in. I'm instinctively like writing in English into all our documents, and the problem is that Florian doesn't understand very well English. So here in this is a private document, so it's a private Trello board. So I'm putting stuff in French for future reference and also for Florian to be able to catch up. So I have a bug into the game. I'm going to start the game. I'm not going to be able to show the bug because it's a very rare bug. But the problem is when I dash on an enemy, what's happening is that the enemies follow the dash. It's like it gets impaled on the dash, and it keeps following the dash until it reaches its end. And I'm going to show you this. So if you pay attention, the enemies follow the dash, and that's because we wanted the dash to be an attack, to be like something, a combo opener. You dash on an enemy, and the enemy is like impale on you or on your sword, and you are going to be able to continue the combo once the dash is finished and keep going. And there is something like a rare bug where the enemy are not dragged with the direction of the dash, but with the opposite direction of the dash. So that means if the enemy is here and I dash on it, it should be following the dash, but the bug make it so that instead of following the players, it goes into the opposite direction. It means that I dash, I hit the enemy, and my character continues the dash while the enemies is like pushed into the other direction. It's pretty strange. It's a very rare bug. I haven't been able to reproduce it much, and I'm still trying to figure this out. And of course, like any kind of bug, it's going to be fixed in like one line of code. But yeah. Other stuff I need to do is to like allowing enemies and bullets to go through scene platforms. Scene platforms are every small platforms that you are going to be able to go through, like this one. You can hit down and jump down, and you can like going through them. This is what we call scene platforms. And right now, bullets don't go through scene platforms, and the AI don't too. They only go through. They try to avoid them. But we want to have some enemies, or maybe all enemies, being able at some point to go through those platforms. Yeah. Questions. So this afternoon you said something about if we were cool, are we cool? Yeah. What I've said something on our Discord today about porting the game to other platforms, and that if people were cool, I would show this. Not sure if it's a good idea to show this publicly because it's a very unannounced stuff and it's unofficial, and yeah. Wait a second. So what I've been doing is that the engine of the game is based on the engine that I've made for Neurovoider, and Neurovoider is a game that has been able to be ported on mostly all consoles or platforms. It's released on PC, Mac Linux, on PlayStation 4, on Xbox One, on Nintendo Switch, on PlayStation Vita. It didn't release on mobiles, but I'm not willing to do a mobile port of this game because it probably going to play like crap or not going to be able to play well. What I've been like trying to I've started to like porting the engine of ScourgeBringer to consoles, to all of them, and yeah, it took me something like 5 minutes because it's based on an already proven engine that I've been able to port everywhere. So basically the stuff that I've been playing around is this, but don't show this to anyone because it's highly illegal stuff. Not allowed to like show stuff that are not supposedly to be even existing. But so yeah, I've been working on this, and the cool thing is that if we ever have any ports to do of the game, it should be fairly straightforward because it already works. So it's just a matter of, well, things. And I believe that you know how things goes when it comes to game and publishings and how it ends up to be. And yeah, I will only get into troubles if you share this. No, joking. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, so thank you very much for dropping by on the stream. Next week I'm going to try working on enhancing everything that is AI, bosses. I'm going to try to start crafting bosses to hopefully get one into the game. I also would like to add new kinds of enemies. Florian already has a new enemies ready, like an enemy that is firing lasers across the screen. So I'm most probably going to try to implement this and start also working on lasers because lasers are cool and we want lasers everywhere. Yeah. And when we started to work on Neurovoider, I didn't quite like it. The idea to make lasers, because lasers implies having specific physics because it don't quite works like bullets. You have to do something like raycasting the trajectory of the lasers to know where it should go, where it should stop, and so on. And that was something that I didn't feel like I wanted to do, but it's cool. Lasers are cool. And Florian was really willing to have lasers. He wanted to have lasers everywhere in the game. And I've always said, oh, I'm not quite sure to see if it would be cool. And one time I've said no, and Florian started to like being depressed for fun, not really, but he laid down on his table like this, and he looked at me with a very empty look, something like crying internally that I've said no to having lasers into the game. And when he did this, I've just said yes. I said yes. I said, oh, come on, we're going to add lasers into the game. And that's how lasers ended up being into Neurovoider. And most obviously there are going to be lasers into ScourgeBringer. So that's all for today. I don't see any more question. Oh, I haven't said hello to a certain kill. Hello. Yeah, of course, if you have any more questions or if you have comments about what you've just seen or anything about this, feel free to drop your question on the YouTube comments if you're watching the replay. replying to your newsletter. It usually ends up into my mailbox, or asking into our Discord channel, or on Twitter, or whatever, anywhere. Just feel free. I'm pretty open to any kind of stuff. So yeah. Searching Hills asking, did I just heard a dishwasher finishing his job? Oh yeah. You have a very good ear. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have my dishwasher that just beeped, and yeah, it finished its program. Yeah. So yeah, see you next week, hopefully. Yeah, talk to you soon, and thank you for being there. See you around. Bye.